I'm delighted to present to you Paul Austin, the fragrance expert who has over 17 years of experience. He has worked with Quest International and Givaudan, the world's largest fragrance company. In 2009, after an extended trip in India, Paul founded Austin Advisory Group. Paul also founded Seed to Scent, which is a unique method in developing fragrances, which links the origin to the finished product. And this is not about me, so Paul, I'd like to hear what you have to say. So Paul, tell us more about your interest in scent in India and what you found here.
Certainly. Just want to see if our slides are coming up. So while the presentation is being loaded, I just want to say thanks again for having us here. It's particularly exciting for me to be here. Do we have the presentation coming up?
No, it's...
I think what I'll just do is jump into it. Yeah, so anyhow, my name is Paul Austin, and I'm really excited to be here because of coming to India a few years ago. It was a totally transformative moment for me in the perfume world. Here we go. Thank you. Just a little bit of background. It's called Making Sense of India. And let's make this go forward. Okay. Oh yeah. So first of all, I am not a nose, but I have pretty much worked with noses my entire life. I worked for one of the largest fragrance creation companies as the head of the global head of fine fragrances for Quest, and then became Givaudan. And what we would do is we would create the actual scent you'd find in fragrances like the ads you see here. So early on in my career, I was like the junior kid in the office when Angel was being developed. I'm sure some of you know that, right through to Le Male and Dior and all these sort of brands. And I worked with a lot of these people. These are the noses, and there's probably about 250 noses worldwide. About 50 of those are fine fragrance perfumers, and here are 3 that I work very closely with, particularly Kelly's, Jan, and Rodrigo. But what happened is, I'm sure you've probably seen this by looking through magazines, there's been such a proliferation of fragrances. It's become completely maddening. It went from maybe a couple of hundred launches 10 years ago to, someone just told me a statistic this morning, 2,500 fragrances were launched last year, right? So there's been this explosion in perfume. And for me, I started in being sort of like running this big machine, I started feeling myself like a bit of a cog, and so it started not to smell so good to me. And so what do you do when you feel like that way? I had my proverbial midlife crisis, and what do you do when you have a midlife crisis? You hop on a plane and come to India, right? I know it's such a cliche. But it was sort of, this was me beforehand, right? This was me before 2008. And just to show how quickly I became native, that was me a few months later. And in fact, I had gone to southern India with a quick stop in Delhi because I wanted to get as far away from the fragrance industry as possible. And I studied it at AVP, the Ayurvedic hospital there. And funnily, all of a sudden, I started smelling things in the air that I recognized from my lab back in New York. So things like the malipu, that
that's very good.
that the southern Indian ladies wear so elegantly in their hair. I started to smell that. And I soon realized that all these ingredients that I knew from anonymous amber brown bottles in a lab in New York suddenly came to life with an incredible notion of context. And having been involved in this business for as long as I had been, I never really had that sense of where it all begins. And so suddenly I looked around and I saw that flowers were everywhere in India, and scent was everywhere in India. And so it just led me on my journey of going to visit flower markets and spending my weekends going and realizing that all these wonderful flowers were being growing around there, the way that you use garlands in this country, how you sell them by the arm length, how great is that, right? So, and the whole relationship with roses and gul, and the fact that you use roses in everything. I think you're one of the largest producers of rose in the world, but you consume all of your own rose oils. So I realized that it was basically, I was in a paradise of flowers and a perfumer's Garden of Eden. And indeed, we from the perfumery industry, I didn't realize just how much we were using from India. And of course, there's some wonderful people who are involved in the processing of this. For champaka, frangipani, lotus, I didn't know that until I came here, that you use lotus in scent development. Peppers, cardamom, clove, even things like vetiver. Everyone's heard of the word vetiver, particularly I know all Europeans will think it's French, right? Well, actually, vetiver is a Tamil word, which means cut root. Patchouli is a Tamil word, which means green leaf. So there's such this extraordinary context and history. So, and of course, you're endlessly fascinating a story about Indian sandalwood and the sad situation that it is Indian sandalwood. And a lot of these travels led me to Canauj. And have many of you heard of Grasse in the south of France? It's the traditional centre of perfumery. Well, indeed, Canauj in Uttar Pradesh was really the Grasse of its time, particularly up until the 11th century. So going back there was like stepping back in time.
So Paul, what role does India play in the creation of international fragrances?
Well, that's a great question. And I think maybe the best way to do it is to sort of do it by smell and tell. So two absolutely key ingredients. I'm going to show you, we're going to smell the first ingredient here, which is jasmine sambac. This is Indian jasmine. We use in perfumery a number of different jasmines, usually grandiflorum. But I'm showing you two ingredients that are absolutely the key to one of the most iconic international fragrances. So does anyone recognize that from the Mogra or the Malipu, or does it smell familiar? This is 100%, this is pure jasmine diluted in alcohol, otherwise it would be too strong.
I think the people at the back haven't had a chance to smell it yet, so.
And then the second set, and I should say that jasmine costs about $5,000, Indian jasmine costs about $5,000 a kilo, and you need about 1 ton of flowers to yield about half a kilo of what we call absolute, which is when you really go through the multiple stages to get down to what a perfumer can use. The second key ingredient is something called Indian tuberose, and it was lovely to hear it being referenced before. It's one of my absolute favourite flowers. It's a little bit heady. It's what we call in the scent world a bit fatty, a bit waxy, and I think it's being passed around now. And just because I know we're short of time, can we also, not to confuse everyone, can we also now pass around the mystery third smelling strip when everyone's ready? Because the perfumer who created the mystery scent, which you'll smell in a minute, who's a very dear friend of mine, Khalees Becker, and I worked closely with her for many years. She's arguably one of the world's best nosers. She said that this mystery fragrance coming around could not have existed without these two Indian ingredients. Do we have the third one coming around now?
I think they're passing the wrong one.
Yeah, they passed the third one first.
Oh, wait, sorry about that. Which? The
Okay.
tuberose, okay.
Well, when you get to the, I think there's blue. The blue is the jasmine, the green is the tuberose, and the red is the mystery fragrance. Okay, so if we can pass around the red too.
We can.
Yeah. So we're going to break the mystery before you smell it. So the thing is that these two ingredients the perfumer who created J'adore could not have created the signature of J'adore without your two extraordinary ingredients. So to think that India is so much a part of one of the most iconic and successful fragrances. And I don't think Indians really understand the impact that they have in the quote-unquote perfumery world.
So what are some of the emerging trends in the perfume industry?
So in terms of thinking about design, who are the designers of the perfumery world? They're what we call perfumers, the noses, for the most part. And what's been happening is that the role of the perfumer has been changing. It used to be a number of patrician white Frenchmen hidden in these big fragrance houses, like the one I used to work for. And they were the ghost writers for all of these sorts of perfumes. But of course, because there's been such a proliferation of niche and indie brands that are all based on truth, intrigue, authenticity, and everyone wants to see what's behind the curtain. So suddenly perfumers have become much more front of house and have been much more sought out as part of the narrative tale.
Which are some of the new brands, Paul, and why are they interesting to you?
Okay, so there are so many great new brands that catch my interest, but I wanted just to sort of show you 3 or 4. I mean, I'm sure some of you are aware of them, but they, I think, represent some of the absolutely key ones going forward. And I think the first one you might have heard about is Frédéric Malle, who calls himself an éditeur de parfum. And what he does, what the innovation was here, he put the perfumer's name, in this case, one of my all-time favourite perfumers, and I'm proud to say I know Olivia well, Olivia Jacobetti, who's also created a lot of scents for Diptyque, for example. And what Frédéric did, he put all the perfumers' names on the front of the bottle. So it really brought perfumers into the limelight. A second one is a fantastic line called Byredo. And this is by Ben Gorham, a fantastically interesting chap who's half Indian, half Swedish. His family's originally from Mumbai. And I know that he sort of says that for him, what makes his line so special, it's very fashion-driven, very collaboration-driven, but the scents he often talks about are the scents from the Indian cuisine that often influence the way that he works with perfumers. And then these guys are really, really, really unknown for the moment, but watch out for them, DS and Durga. Carvey on the right, these are the hipster kids from Brooklyn. They've got this great line there, and it's all coming from this American artisanal movement. They're very anti-fragrance. They do more, sort of slightly more ironic, slightly kitsch, but very authentic work. So Carvey is an architect, and David is a musician. And so here's a couple of, this is one of their scents called My Indian Childhood, which is for Carvey a reminiscence of her trips to India when she was a child. And another great one called Burning Barbershop, which I think gives the sense of how David works as a perfumer. They take a very specific moment, and I think this one says, a fire broke out in the Carling Brothers barbershop in Westlake in 1891. All the shaving tonics with their spearmint lime, vanilla and lavender was all charred. The whole thing was charred, and this is the smell of what was left. So it's such an unusual concept to build a scent around. And David is actually not a classically trained perfumer, but he's part of what I see as this growing trend of really people who are creative and expressive and expressing themselves through scent. So it seems to me that it's no longer the domain of le parfumeur, and people are being much more involved in creating scents, even if they're not classically trained. And then it's funny, Jerome before mentioned Le Labo, right? And this is, for me, a very interesting line. It's one of the most successful lines in this very niche end of the perfumery business. And what they've done, they've taken the whole experience of the perfumery and they've actually brought it into the shop. So when you go to the shop, as Jerome said before, it's made for you fresh, right? So they actually compound it for you there. It's got all the touch points of being in a labo, which is French for laboratory, perfumer's lab. And it's sort of also a bit of an anti-perfume perfume. But having said that, this is very premium priced. And in fact, I think there are 2 people in the audience who have a smelling strip with 3 dots on them. Is that right? Because most people have smelling strips with 1 dot. There should be 2 people that have one with 3 dots, because I have gifts. Well, if you find it, I've got a specially labelled Le Labo bottle for the IDF winner, and also the My Indian Childhood from DS and Durga to give away to the person with the 3 dots. You got it?
Who's got it? Can you pass that here, please? Thank you. You want to continue with the... Oh, is that right? She's got 2 dots.
Okay, yeah, it's good, yeah. No, it's 2 dots.
2 dots, yeah.
2 dots. So I'll bring it round to you after, Banda.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Here we go. This is Le Vetiver of Le Labo. Voilà. Okay.
Oh, and we have one more.
And then the My Indian Childhood, I believe, is here from DS and Durga. Thank you, pleasure. Okay. Okay. Go.
So, the design world seems increasingly interested in fragrance, Paul. Why is that?
Well, what's been happening is with the rise of people wanting to know about the creators and the designers in every realm, so too has it been in the case of perfumery. And we're starting to see that the design community is starting to be more intrigued with the world of perfumery. And so here are 3 examples about how we're witnessing that. Here are 3 examples of how we're witnessing. First of all, the French cultural minister just awarded the Chevalier des Arts et des Lettres to 5 perfumers for the first time. It's the highest cultural honor in France. It was the first time. Second thing, MoMA, Paolo Antonelli at MoMA and Tim Marshall at the New School put on a symposium last year called Headspace, which was bringing together 400 architects, industrial designers, and artists and perfumers together to explore this notion of relationship between scent and design and how you think about 3-dimensional space. That's in itself a fantastic symposium. And the third example is that the Museum of Art and Design in New York is the first museum to establish the Department of Olfactory Arts. So it's actually the first time a major museum is attempting to bring the work of perfumery and bring it to the same level of the other design fields.
Paul, unfortunately, we're running short on time, so we're going to have to wind up. Is there anything else you'd like to say about yourself?
Sure. Well, look, I had a film to show you, which I don't know if we've got time to show.
Unfortunately, we don't.
But my passion is my challenge, I think, to the Indians is look to your own. I know it's a bit of a cliche, but I think that there's something about looking to your own garden to see that you've got such a riches around you, both from an olfactory point of view, from a narrative storytelling point of view, and all the rituals that you use in perfumery, the way that you scent, the way you use desert coolers with cuss, or there's all the way that you use floral garlands to scent interiors. Let's think about how we can reinterpret those dimensions rather than looking to Europe as the French perfumery as the way to go forth. And to finish off, my passion is this concept of seed to scent, which is really tying the origins of the ingredients through to the final scent. And my dream would be to bring India along that journey with me. So thank you for having me, and thank you, Ash.
Thank you so much, Paul. Thank you.